Hi, my name is Brandon, and today I'm going to be discussing some psychological disorders. Although I've never been diagnosed with one, nor have I ever had one, I do know multiple people that have had some. In this video, I'm really going to be discussing depression, anxiety, and bipolar disorder. So, a little bit of background on some psychological disorders. They've been around and treated since about as early as 3000 BC. And back then, the treatment was a little more brutal. They used to drill holes into the affected person's skull, and they would do this by trying to release demons. Obviously, there's been some modern advancement in the way we treat this, such as medications and other such things. So, some data suggests that about 26% of Americans do suffer from some kind of psychological disorder. So, roughly about 58 million people in America currently are suffering from a psychological disorder. So, what this means is the prevalence of psychological disorders are actually very high. And it's something that, we should probably pay a little more attention to, and something that we should research a little more so we can be there for those around.
Let's think about some of the symptoms that people with anxiety might be experiencing. It's not uncommon to have all sorts of muscular symptoms, headaches, backaches, shoulder problems, tight necks. All these sorts of things can be problems that people with anxiety might experience. People with anxiety might also experience very unusual sensations such as choking sensations, difficulty swallowing, feeling short of breath. They might have their heart racing. Sometimes they might actually experience some chest discomfort. Sometimes it is mistaken for heart attack. Other sorts of problems might be excessive sweating, sweaty hands, sweaty palms. These would be very common characteristic symptoms of individuals experiencing different forms of anxiety.
So for the example of anxiety, I am going to be using my ex, Emma. She suffered from a lot of those symptoms. So, my ex, Emma, was diagnosed with anxiety towards the beginning of our relationship, and for the first year where I really got to know her, I got to really see how that disorder affected her. However, she was also very OCD. Whenever those bouts kicked in, it was usually mainly due to the fact that she was suffering from anxiety. And so she would start to, do cleaning and other things like that, like studying, things that she could really control since she was having really no control over her mind at the moment. She was diagnosed with general anxiety disorder since she suffered from this for many months, and it was almost an entirely like a daily thing. Many of the examples in our textbooks are exactly what I observed with Emma. She was extremely smart, and I mean like top of the class smart. However, no matter what, every little project or homework assignment we were given, she had an extreme anxiety over it. Going into tests, she would have studied as much as she possibly could, and she knew that material like the back of her hand. Yet she would go in with severe anxiety. She would always talk about how her heart would race and would not calm down at all. Her hands would always clam up, and she actually almost became paralyzed by the anxiety multiple times. Now, since she noticed this and she is a very smart girl, she decided to go and talk to a therapist about this, and she also did some of her own research. As a result, she discovered that a possible cause of her anxiety was a lack of neurotransmitters being released by her body. So Emma tried really hard in those days to ensure that she increased both her serotonin levels and the neurotransmitter GABA. Whenever she felt her anxiety coming on, she would take a GABA pill, and that usually, for the most part, would help to calm her down a little bit. However, she did have bouts where she had panic attacks, and the anxiety got extremely bad. So at these times, she would resort to taking a minor dosage of a drug that would be classified as a benzodiazepine, or better known as Xanax. However, something that she and I tried before she would resort to the pills is usually we would try and go to the gym and exercise for about an hour to an hour and a half. From what I observed, this occasionally would help to alter her mood and got more neurotransmitters released in her brain. However, it wasn't really a perfect sign. Given some of the more modern research, though, it seems that the disorder that she has may actually be coming from genetic reasons, meaning that someone in her direct bloodline, meaning like her dad or her mom or possibly a grandparent, suffered from some of these disorders, and those genetic traits were passed down to her. So it's really no fault of her own. It's not something that she observed as a child, but more so as a result of who she is genetically.
Depression is a serious medical illness that involves the brain. It's more than just a feeling of being down in the dumps or blue for a few days. If you are one of the more than 20 million people in the United States who have depression, the feelings do not go away. They persist and interfere with your everyday life. Symptoms can include sadness, loss of interest or pleasure in activities you used to enjoy, change in weight, difficulty sleeping or oversleeping, energy loss, feelings of worthlessness, thoughts of death or suicide.
Depression is a disorder of the brain. There are a variety of causes, including genetic, environmental, psychological, and biochemical factors.
Hey bud, how's it going? So man, do you want to go out and get some food? I'm not hungry. I don't want to do that. You want to go to the gym or something? No, I'm alright. I'm just gonna stay here. No? Are you sure? Come on, dude, let's just go do something. You've been laying here all day. Yeah, I know I've been here all day. Now that may be a slight exaggeration of the situation. However, what I showed is actually a real encounter I had multiple times with my old roommate. He was diagnosed with major depression. As was stated in the video, my roommate loved to work out and go to the gym. However, when he was suffering from depression, he didn't want to do that at all. He really would just lay on the couch all day. No matter what we would offer to do, he would always say no and wouldn't really want to move from the couch. He also would oversleep all the time, and really just walk between his bed and the couch, and rarely would want to leave the room and do anything. Since we knew him well before a lot of this was going on, when we noticed his change in attitude, we talked to him about it, and even though we didn't really know what was going on with him at the time, he kind of confided in us that he wasn't feeling too good, he was feeling depressed a lot, that over summer some things had changed, and so as a result he ended up going and seeing a therapist. At that point they did diagnose him with major depression, and he never expressed wanting to commit suicide or die, but he did say that due to some outside circumstances, he did feel worthless and like his life was meaningless. After seeking help with the therapist, though, they believed that the problem was more a biological and genetic disorder, and so as a result, they prescribed him some medication. He didn't say what they were, but he did say that they kind of helped out a little bit. However, at other times, it actually made the symptoms worse, and he would feel even more depressed.
There are symptoms of mania and symptoms of depression. Symptoms of mania are really associated with not only an elevated mood, but a change in energy and sleep and impulsivity. And those really are the hallmark symptoms that we look for diagnosing mania. Not sleeping, not tired, energized, productive, sometimes creative, an elevated, sometimes an irritable mood. Those really are hallmark symptoms that we look for when diagnosing mania. The flip side is really looking for depression, and this is where most patients with bipolar disorder live. They spend more time depressed than they do manic or hypomanic. We look for that mood change, depressed mood, not enjoying things. We look for a sleep pattern, most commonly sleeping too much, with a profound sense of feeling slowed down.
So for my last example, I'm going to be mainly using my little sister's close friend. She was diagnosed recently with acute bipolar disorder, and this means that she mainly has hypomania, and she doesn't go into hypermania, but she does have hypomania, so she has the slight mania, and then she goes into severe depression. She has been someone that has struggled mainly with severe depression most of the time, and rarely has that hypomania aspect, but she does exhibit it. The majority of the time, she oversleeps and she doesn't want to leave her apartment. Many of the times my sister has actually described going over and trying to coax her out of the apartment, get her to come out and go do stuff, and rarely does she ever really want to go do that. However, the moment she steps out of that depression phase, she does exhibit a lot of that hypomania, where she becomes a little more irritable, but she does have a ton of energy. She wants to go do everything. She's here to there, and she wants to run all over the place. At this time is when she's exhibiting most of her restlessness, whereas typically she is in that phase where she only wants to sleep and stay at home. So to wrap this video up, psychological disorders are something that are extremely prevalent at this moment in this day and age. About 1 in 4 people have some kind of disorder, which means it's all around us and everyone somewhere knows someone. So with that being said, it's something that we should bring to the forefront of our mind, something that we should be thinking a little more about of how to help these people around us. With that being said, thank you for listening to this video, and have a good day.